Welcome to another edition of GTN Coaches Corner. On this week's show, how do I keep run fit during the winter? Why is my watch zone to 60% but my lab zone to 80%? Should I prioritize sleep or training? How do I strengthen my ankles? And how do I swim better with one arm? Let's get straight into your questions. Astro Turd, I didn't choose the name, says, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. I'm wondering how many kilometers per week I should run to keep my run fitness during a period of focusing on other sports. I live in Finland and I'm running maybe 40 to 50 kilometers a week before the snow comes and my focus shifts to cross-country skiing for the winter months, December to March. I would like to run every week to keep a reasonable weekly run volume as I'm looking at taking part in my first ever marathon in the middle of May. If I maintain 20 kilometers per week during the winter, going by the 10% rule, I would need around 10 weeks to increase my volume back to 50 kilometers a week and probably a taper week as well before the marathon. However, that's nearly 3 months, so I need to start ramping up the volume already in February. What would you recommend? Is it better to run shorter distance twice a week versus a longer distance once a week? And can a reasonable run fitness be maintained with only one run per week? Okay, first, if you're doing aerobic activities like cross-country skiing, you've got a reasonable run fitness, you can maintain that with about one run a week. You won't really lose anything, especially if you're doing that other aerobic activity. If you maintain 20 kilometers per week, you'd certainly be a good place to start that marathon build-up after the winter snow has kind of eased a little bit. Here's my advice. Forget the 10% rule entirely. It's not relevant to you. A 10% rule is really if you're ramping up to a mileage you've never done before. If you've done 40 to 50 kilometers per week consistently for a significant period of time, that fitness is there. The 10% rule is for someone who's going to new mileage that they've never done before and they need to build it up slowly. If you can maintain that fitness throughout the winter with one run or two runs per week, you don't need to ramp up the 10% rule. You could probably get back to 40 to 50 kilometers a week in 2 to 3 weeks pretty quickly without any risk of injury. So don't worry too much about the 10% rule. Forget about that. If you were starting from scratch, then yeah, the 10% rule is a pretty good rule to follow, but you're not. And finally, to answer your last question, is it better to do one 20-kilometer run a week or two 10-kilometer runs a week to maintain that fitness? I'd say it's almost certainly better to do two 10-kilometer runs a week than one 20-kilometer run a week. You simply don't need to go into that full 20 kilometers. And if you do 20 kilometers once and then nothing for another 7 to 9 days, that's not going to have as much of an advantage as every 3 to 4 days running 10 kilometers. So I'd go 2 10 kilometers. You can once or twice during that winter go out for a longer 20 kilometer, but I would stick to 2 10-kilometer runs a week and then do the cross-country skiing, and you will find that you are pretty fit come March. Next question, David P1879, hashtag Coaches Corner. Question on calculating heart rate zones. I took a VO2 max test on the treadmill and the group provided my max heart rate and zones, but used 80% to calculate my zone 2. But Garmin and Strava use 60% to calculate zone 2. I read there are differences in opinion, which is correct. Okay, if you have done a lab test and they've given you heart rate zones, use those zones. Ignore your watch zones. They are notoriously inaccurate. And if they're using numbers sucked out of the sky, they're even more inaccurate, like an estimated max heart rate. Even if you're using a max heart rate that you tested or estimated from that VO2 max test, it's still not your actual max heart rate. So those zones are still going to be a little out. What they've done during your VO2 max test, they haven't used your VO2 max heart rate to work out your zones. What they've almost certainly done is use your lactate threshold heart rate to work out your heart rate zones. That is the point where your lactate suddenly spikes, that major turning point in what energy system is predominantly providing the energy for your exercise. And they've used that to work out your zones. And 60% of your lactate threshold heart rate is very, very easy work. Your zone 2 would be 74 to 90% of your lactate threshold heart rate, whereas it would be 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. And that's what your watch is doing. Your watch is using your max heart rate or some calculation using your max and resting heart rate. It's not using your lactate threshold heart rate, which is what they've done in that VO2 max test. They've looked at where your lactate threshold is. They worked out your zones based on that. Those are going to be significantly more accurate than your watch will ever be. So plug those into your watch. For example, on the Coros, you can actually go into the app, put in your lactate threshold heart rate on the app, and then it'll work out your zones based on what you know your lactate threshold heart rate is, rather than estimating it based on an estimated max heart rate. So yeah, you've done a lab test. You must use the data that you got from it. HS14NZ asks, what is more important, an hour more sleep or 20 minutes more swimming? I can either get up super early and get an hour of swimming in, or go to the pool in my lunch hour and get about 40 minutes of swimming in. Early mornings take more of a toll, but sometimes I get too busy at work and can't go at lunchtime either. Your thoughts? FYI, I'm training for an Olympic and 70.3s. I think you've answered your own question there. You get more swimming if you go in the morning and do a full hour of swimming, and also you're far less likely to miss it, whereas life gets in the way of a lunchtime swim, and you're going to miss your swim entirely. The question about sleep, though, does bring up an interesting point. Sleep is vital, and losing an hour of sleep for training is sometimes not worth it. But if you've already had, unless you've obviously already had 8 to 9 hours of sleep, and then you don't need another hour of sleep, go train. But your sleep is better, deeper, more productive if you do it the same every day. If you go to bed the same time, you wake up the same time, and you get into that pattern. Soon you'll be getting up without an alarm, and you will have slept really, really well. And then getting up early to do that swim no longer takes a toll. It's just your normal. I would suggest get up early to do those swims on the days when it's a swim day, and the other days also get up early at the same time, every day. And then you'll soon find it takes no toll whatsoever to get up early. You may need to go to bed an hour earlier at night so that you get your full night's sleep, but that's actually not that hard to do if you just work your life around going to bed an hour earlier. Soon you'll be getting up, jumping out of bed, ready to train. On a swim day, you'll be in the pool getting your full hour, and on your run days and bike days, you'll have that hour, you'll have it done before work while you're fresh, and you can do it really effectively. While you're adjusting to this, use that 40-minute lunchtime gap that you have to take a little power nap. And you'll find that before you know it, you'll begin all your training done before work starts, and your lunch hours will be free to do whatever you like. Or do an extra session, if that's what you want to do. Jet125 asks, what can I do to strengthen my ankles? I've had recurring issues, probably due to too much mileage too quickly. I do just love to run. This time, though, I'm determined not to get injured. Well, it sounds like you know what the problem is, and you know how to fix it. Just don't ramp it up too quickly. Don't get carried away. Don't put too much strain on your body. Build up slowly, and you'll be running consistently, and you won't have to take long breaks from the thing that you love, which is running, because you've ruined your ankle again. If you do want to strengthen your ankle, there are various things you can do. I would get into a gym and do some wobble board exercises are really good for your ankle, but also just strengthen all the muscles around your ankle, your calves, your tibialis anterior, those muscles on the front of your shin, and also your foot muscles. You can do things just at home, like with a towel, where you pull the towel towards you with your toes to really strengthen those foot muscles, and you'll find that your ankles get stronger in the process, you're much more stable on them, and you're less likely to get injured. But really, as you already know, the key is to ramp up slowly, build up slowly, don't put too much strain on them. No matter how much you love running, you don't want to be sidelined from running for another 6 to 8 weeks because you've got another ankle injury. So build up slowly, it'll be worth in the long run, and then just be consistent. Don't take long breaks, and your ankles will be absolutely fine. The final question for today comes from K Hunt 7070. I had a brain bleed several years ago that led to full paralysis on one side. Whoa. I have worked to be able to do triathlon, but I am very slow. I find I can improve on the bike and run, but given I'm not physically able to have good form, and never will be able to, I can't seem to improve my speed in the swim. Any suggestions other than good form for improving my swim speed? Well, firstly, kudos on your triathlon efforts and your goals. We are very much inspired. That is great. The solution is, I'm afraid, going to be technique. You may not be able to have completely good form with a perfect body roll and everything like that, but you can use your catch well, make sure you're catching the absolute maximum amount of water so that your good arm is actually pulling really, really well and you're really efficient. So the solution is good form, but also it's applying the strength that you build really well in that water. And most of that is good form, but also it's obviously the strength to do that consistently again and again. I would suggest that, yes, get some advice on how to catch properly. Make sure that it's tying into the rest of your stroke really well so you don't have dead spots in your stroke. Obviously, without being able to actually see you swim, it's hard to give any more advice than that. But if you can get some advice to make sure you don't have dead strokes in your swim, dead points in your swim, you will find that you're significantly more efficient. And then it is simply a matter of strengthening those muscles that you can strengthen to make sure that they are efficient and as strong as possible. It's not just about power in the water, it's about applying that power effectively at the right speed, and that takes a significant amount of strength. So I would say dry land exercises such as using stretch cords, etc., to really strengthen the muscles that you are using in the swim that you might not actually be able to specifically strengthen while you're swimming because of your specific challenges that you face in the water. I hope that helps, and I hope all of our questions today have helped. If you have your own questions, below this video in the comment section, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, and we'll be answering your question perhaps next week. Thanks for watching. See you then.